Good. Well, good morning, everyone. This is the December 3rd Technical Advisory Committee meeting for 2025, last one of the year. We've got some pretty easy items here and then an important update from Steve and his crew towards the end of the meeting regarding the regional solicitation process and the update with that. So first order of business here, approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any recommended changes or updates to that? All right, not seeing any hands come up or hearing any conversation. We'll consider the existing agenda approved. The next item is approval of the November 5th, 2025 Technical Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes or amendments to that, or I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes?
Alyssa will make a motion to approve.
Thanks,
Second.
Alyssa.
Second.
All you were
Molly.
second?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll move to roll call on this. Joe, the slate is yours.
Anoka County, McPherson.
Aye.
Carver County, Robgent.
Aye.
I heard that. Dakota County, Laborie.
Aye.
Hennepin County, Elos.
Aye.
Ramsey County, Rogers, I believe you're the member now.
No, I'm sitting in for Mike. Aye.
But Brian, to clarify, Mike will be the member going forward, and you'll be
Yes.
the alternate, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Scott County, Jensen, I think you're still the member.
Yep.
You're right.
Aye. You got it.
Washington County, Leitner.
Aye.
7W, Hausman. Or Witter. Egan, Mathis.
Aye.
Eden Prairie, Schulze.
Aye.
Fredley, Kozlucher.
Aye.
Chanhassen, Howley.
Abstain.
Brooklyn Park, Culver.
Aye.
Woodbury, Hartzell.
Aye.
Lakeville, Omi.
Aye.
Plymouth, Thompson.
Aye.
Minneapolis Engineering, Hager.
Aye.
Planning, Mail.
Abstain, I wasn't there.
St. Paul Engineering, Nick Peterson.
Aye.
Planning, Collins. No. Metro Transit, On.
Aye.
Suburban Transit, Fighton.
Aye.
ENR, Spooner, Walsh. Bicycle Representative, Sabota.
Aye.
Pedestrian Representative, Turner Bargain.
Aye.
Speed, Eddie. Mac, Reef. Community Development, Boylan. On a cold streak. Freight, Meyer. Metro, McCartney.
Aye for Molly.
MPCA, AO.
Aye.
MTS, Peterson, Steve. I didn't hear that. I thought I heard a little mumble. One more time, Steve.
Aye.
All right, that's good enough. And Tab, Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair, 23 ayes and 2 abstentions.
All right, thank you, Joe. Minutes have been approved. Next, we'll move into the public comment on committee business here. Do we have any members of the public that would like to address the Technical Advisory Committee?
Chair, we heard nothing as a staff.
All right, thank you, Joe. Not seeing any hands raised, I'll just ask again. Are there any members of the public that are joining us this morning on this meeting that would like to address the committee? Okay, not seeing any hands come up or hearing any voices. We'll move on. Next is the TAB report. Elaine?
Thank you, Chair. TAB met on November 19th. For the chair's report, Chair Hovland reported that the Regional Solicitation Policymaker Work Group met before the TAB meeting. Discussion was primarily around the community considerations and how to make equity work in a community context. There was discussion on the weighting of the criterion in relation to other criteria. The technical committees have been asked to provide feedback on the weighting on this criterion. And also, Chair Hovland welcomed new TAB alternate for St. Paul, Molly Coleman. And then also Minneapolis TAB member Katie Cashman did not win re-election and will be stepping down from TAB at the end of the year. And then TAB Executive Committee membership will be selected at the January TAB meeting. Interested members should contact Elaine to let them know their interest in serving. For the MnDOT report, Sheila Calpe reported on safety updates for all traffic fatalities in Minnesota. There were 37 fatalities since the last TAB meeting for a total of 335. Last year at this time, the fatality number was 477. The Minnesota Rail Service Improvement Grant Program provides grants for freight service improvement projects that support economic development. Up to $4 million is currently available statewide, and the applications are due January 9th in 2026. There was no MPCA report. For the MAC report, Bridget Reef reported that the federal shutdown was over and there were about 400 canceled flights in total at MSP. This year, the airports participated in the North American-wide Airport Carbon Accreditation Program that Airports Council International puts out. The MSP is at level 3 for a second year in a row. All 6 reliever airports were enrolled in the program for the first time and are at level 1. There have been a couple departures from the MAC Commission. One is TAB member Carl Cribbins. MAC is working on filling the position. Bridget will report until the new TAB member is appointed. For the Metropolitan Council, Deb Barber reported on the ABRT B line on Lake Marshall and Selby. There is an average of 9,700 rides per day, which is 39% higher than Route 21, the same month last year. And the B line celebrated its 1 millionth rider. The applications for the council appointed TAB members are open for citizen districts A through D, alternates for districts E and F, and the modal representatives. Priority will be given to applications submitted before December 4th. For the Suburban Transit Association, Suburban Transit Providers report continued overall ridership increases. MBTA's Connect microtransit ridership was up 35%, setting a new record in October of over 19,000 rides. And then from November 7th through the 21st, MBTA offered free rides on Connect to make easier for people accessing food pantries within the Connect service area. For the business items, TAB approved 3 streamline tip amendments, Southwest Transit Station rehabilitation, 2 bicycle and pedestrian project increases, and the 3 MnDOT project adjustments, which came through TAC. They approved the scope change for the Carver County CASA 40 HSIP project and retained the full funding. They approved the regional bicycle barrier and regional bicycle transportation network updates for the 2026 regional solicitation maps, and then for being released for public comment as part of the 2026 regional solicitation public comment period. They approved the 2026 regional solicitation federal funding application categories, which are the 12 categories that were approved by TAC. They approved the categories for the active transportation regional solicitation funding, the 3 categories for local bike, local pedestrian, and active transportation planning. They also approved the maximum and minimum federal awards. So there was some changes. A $30 million minimum award for arterial bus rapid transit funding category, with the footnote that TAB can award additional funding to arterial BRT only when within the transit funding target. A $5.8 million funding award for the travel demand management base funding program was added within the TDM category. This information had not been part of the motion that came from TAC. And a funding award for travel behavior inventory and modeling program to be approved through a future TAB action. There was an amendment proposed to increase the maximum for the TDM category to $1 million. That amendment failed. There was discussion on the importance of car share. There were questions on the amount of funding that previous car share projects received. The current categories don't appear to have eligibility for car share or bike share projects. There needs to be a category for these projects. TAB asked the technical committees to discuss the eligibility of electric vehicle car share and bike share in the application categories. Are they eligible to apply in the TDM category or other categories? One member mentioned that the bike share was not considered by active transportation work group because they thought it would be covered under the environment category. If they are not eligible for current draft applications, discuss how to revise the applications to allow eligibility. They also approved the active transportation maximum minimum awards. They approved modal funding targets. The Transportation Advisory Board recommend the following funding targets: 12% for safety, 14% for bike pedestrian, 24% for transit, 44% for roadways, and 6% for environment. And then the last item, they approved the active transportation funding targets and recommended the 50 million as a target that came through TAC. There was one information item on the regional solicitation evaluation update. As far as discussion, a member asked why the reactive safety measure for fatal and serious injury crash history carries only 5% of the points, noting that some dangerous locations may show few crashes because people avoid them. Staff explained that the low weighting does not reflect lack of importance. Rather, the scoring emphasizes the 5-year crash reduction estimate, which accounts for 35% of the points and offers a clearest picture of recent safety issues. The 10-year crash history is included primarily as a tiebreaker to identify longer-term systemic problems, consistent with MnDOT's HSIP approach and the Regional Safety Action Plan. Because total points are limited, the working group prioritized creating near-term crash patterns and plan connections over longer-term data. TAB requested additional technical feedback on the criteria weighting. Member also commented on the need for additional members in both the regional and local bike categories. There should be an element of scoring that rewards high quality state-of-the-art infrastructure more than lower quality state-of-the-art infrastructure. I think that there will be some information that was shared with the TAB member, because I think that is included in our measures and may need to be specifically pointed out. There was our TAB report.
Thank you, Elaine. Any questions for Elaine? That was a long meeting, a lot of information to get through. So I do want to send out a thank you to all of you that were involved in each one of these special working groups and getting to this point. So it's been a lot of work, a lot of effort. Looking back to earlier this year, hard to believe that we made it this far. Still got a ways to go. We got a lot of items ahead. I know Steve's gonna dazzle us here in January with a bunch more action items that we need to work through. So we'll hear a little bit more about that later in this meeting. But thank you, Elaine. Very detailed report. Appreciate that. Next, we'll move into the committee reports and business. The first one here is the executive committee. The TAC exec committee did meet this morning at 8:15, just prior to this meeting. We talked about the action items that you see before you on the screen, as well as just kind of a quick update on some of the regional solicitation items. As Elaine had mentioned, some of the TAB members had asked that the technical steering committee review a few of the items, such as the criteria scoring percentages, the weighting, the car share, bike share. And so we'll hear a little bit more from Steve later on today about where some of that sits and what's come of that since the TAB meeting. So additionally, I do want to call out that in January, because of the action items before us, we are planning to have that as an in-person meeting at this time. And so just mark that on your calendars that as of right now, that's proposed at the January meeting will be in person, not virtual. If that changes, similar to what happened at this meeting, we will notify all of you again. But any questions on that? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move into our first two items here. Item number 1, action item 2025-44 is a streamlined TIP amendment for a safe St. Paul Safe Streets and Roads for All. grant. Joel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a bit of an unusual tip amendment in terms of the type of project we're seeing. And therefore, we're going to see a change to the motion as we worked through it a little bit at TAC Exec this morning. And I'll share that motion up on the screen in a second. But you're really approving the same thing that you thought you'd be approving in any case. So the city of St. Paul was awarded federal Safe Streets for All implementation funding in 2024, and that'll be used to implement transportation safety countermeasures on the city's high injury street network. These things include curb extensions, medians, pavement markings, street lighting, signage, and reflective signal backplates. So St. Paul was awarded the funding, and according to some of the information you see in here, MnDOT will be managing the project. That's not really true. And so I'm going to share right now a proposed updated amendment on this that would change this from MnDOT to St. Paul's, and then we'll do some language correcting in the action transmittal and in the tip amendment. And we didn't specify that, but all we're doing is changing the tone from not really calling it a MnDOT project anymore. It does have a MnDOT number that's 8825-1417, and so that tricked me and others into some language that needs to be tweaked. But with that, I would stand for any questions.
All right, thanks, Joe. Are you pulling that new language up?
Oh yeah, that's right. I was sharing my window and not my screen.
And Molly, I see you have a question.
More of a comment. Thanks, Chair. So, just a little more background. This is the, there's a state of Minnesota, MnDOT has a matching grant program for projects that have received IIJA, the federal bill discretionary grants. And so this is amending to add the state matching grant money. I think that's maybe why it has the project number, which is a MnDOT project number. It just is, helps us identify in the big STIP spreadsheet where that funding source is coming from. So it's a good thing for St. Paul.
Yeah, thanks.
So the
Molly.
amended motion would turn out like this on the sort of data on the project, and then you'd see changes in the action transmittal.
And Joel, maybe one additional change on the screen you have up right
Oops,
now.
that's the wrong project though. Never mind. That's we have an amendment to the next one too. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yep. Okay. So as Joel
Move
mentioned,
to approve with the corrected language, Brian.
thanks, Brian. Do we have a second?
Second, Alice Hennepin.
Thanks, Chad. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Not seeing any. We'll move to roll call. Mr. Barbeau?
McPherson,
Aye.
Robjet,
Aye.
Labrie, Hellos,
Aye.
Isaacson,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Leitner.
Aye.
7W here. Mathis,
I'm gonna abstain.
Schulze,
Aye.
Lucher,
Aye.
Howley,
Aye.
Culver,
Aye.
Hartzell,
Aye.
Homey,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Hager,
Aye.
Mayell,
Aye.
Nick Peterson,
Aye.
Ruben Collins or St. Paul Planning.
Aye.
On,
Aye.
Fighton,
Aye.
DNR Spooter Walsh, Sabota,
Aye.
Turner Bargan,
Aye.
Deed Eddie, Reef,
Aye.
Community Development Boylan,
Aye.
Freight Meyer, McCartney,
Aye.
AO,
Aye.
Steve Peterson.
Aye.
And Kotsukos.
Aye.
28 ayes and an abstention, Chair.
All right, thank you, Joe. That item has been approved. All right, next we'll move on to the next streamlined tip amendment, action item number 2025-45. This is for 4 project changes. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, 4 project changes. I sort of we've been sort of merging those into fewer items of late. Well, by of late, I mean since COVID started 5 years ago. And we did separate the last one because it was a little bit unusual, and I'm glad we did since we need to make some tweaks. And there will be a little bit of tweaking to this one too. I apologize for that. Got a couple of minor errors. So it's gonna be in the first project. So I'll go through these. Here's what we have for the first project. This is a pretty simple scope change request to add guardrail and ADA improvements to MnDOT US 10 mill and overlay project. And this morning we were alerted that they also want to add grading to this project. And so the motion will reflect the addition of grading here in red, and then this US 10 because this MN 65 was done errantly. So that will be reflected in the new motion that I'll share at the end. The next project or the next amendment, this is what you're looking at here are the projects that are going away from the tip. These are 6 Section 5310 mobility management projects that MnDOT Central Office manages, and they're rolling them along with some other of their 5310 activities into one project line. And the reason that they're doing this is because Federal Transit Administration has actually asked them to do that. So going forward into future tips, you will see these always as one project line. This is kind of similar to like our TDM project line where we don't name the projects. And so MnDOT was willing to comply with the request from their partners at FTA. The next one is a MnDOT project as well, Minnesota Highway 65, a big project full of bridges and interchanges. And they're adding a bridge right here, and that is a pedestrian bridge, and this comes with an increased cost. And then finally, we have a project that occurs, this is an unusual project in a sense, in that it occurs primarily in Chisago County. So I'll go down to the map where you see it sneaking into Washington County here. And what's happening here is that they're also removing a pedestrian bridge from the project, and the project is going up by $34 or $35 million, which is a lot of money, and there's a lot of reasons for that I think a lot of technical committee folks will understand. But I found those out. There's some earthwork some increased costs in earthwork. Bids went up higher than hoped. Included geotextile fabric for the MDR recommendations and added reinforcement for concrete pavement. So these are kind of typical of big projects increasing in cost. So the cost was enough that we needed to run through a tip amendment. And also you have a couple of the projects changing from 26 to 27. All these projects are really one big effort though. So with that, I would stand for questions, and I would put up the proposed new amendment to reflect that first project.
All right, thank you, Joe. Are there any questions for Joe? Not seeing any. I'd entertain a motion to approve the amended proposed motion here.
So moved.
All right, thank you. We got a first. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right,
Chair,
thank you.
who made the motion?
Patrick Boylan.
Okay, and I believe that was Jim Kozlucher in the second.
Correct.
Thank you. All right, McPherson,
Aye.
Robjit,
Aye.
Labrie,
Aye.
Ellos,
Aye.
Isaacson,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Leitner,
Aye.
Mathis,
Aye.
Schulze,
Aye.
Kozlucher,
Aye.
Howley,
Aye.
Culver,
Aye.
Hartzell,
Aye.
Omi,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Hager,
Aye.
Mayel,
Aye.
Nick Peterson,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Han,
Aye.
Fighton,
Aye.
Sabota,
Aye.
Turner Bargan,
Aye.
Reef,
Aye.
Boylan,
Aye.
McCartney,
Aye.
Ayo,
Aye.
Steve Peterson.
Aye.
Kotsukos.
Aye.
And I didn't call anybody that hadn't responded the first couple of times, so let us know if we missed you. Otherwise, we have 29 ayes and no noes or abstentions.
All right, thank you, Joe. That item is approved. Next on the list here, we have an update on the TAC Transit Planning Technical Working Group. Joe or Bradley?
Chair,
or
Chair, they didn't meet and there will be no update today.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that update. Next, we'll move on to the Planning Committee, and I'll turn it over to the chair, Gina Medico.
Good morning, everyone. I have a couple of items from TAC Planning. They met on November 13th, and we had 2 action items, which you will hear today. The first one is item 2025-41, review of the Metropolitan Airports Commission 2026 to 2032 Capital Improvement Program. Joe will give us an overview of that, and I believe he's here to present, Joe Whiting. The TAC Planning Committee did approve or recommend acceptance of the staff recommendation of the CIP. Is Joe here?
Thanks, Gina.
Oh,
And I will take over right now. Just gotta share my screen here. So it is that time of year again, everybody. We are back here looking at the MAC Capital Improvement Program for their 7 airports in the region. So that's 2026 to 2032 CIP for the MAC airports. And we'll go in through here. I'll just remind everybody kind of the roles of us, the Met Council, and MAC, and the process of the CIP, and then go into some notable projects, and then the review of the CIP itself for the motion. If I can get it going. There we go. So again, just remind everybody, so the Metropolitan Airports Commission, or MAC, role in the regional airports is really defined in Minnesota Statutes 473601 to 679 to really promote and aviation and competitive air service at the 7 airports, MSP and 6 relievers, owns and operates those 7 airports, prepares airport long-term comprehensive plans, which we've seen come through the last couple of years at Flying Cloud and at MSP, and then also, as we're here today, annually prepares their capital improvement program to implement those planned improvements, and then that program then comes through the TAC committee before being approved by the council in January. On our side, at the Met Council side, so our role really found in 473621. That's to prepare the Regional Aviation System Plan, which is moving through adoption as we speak, to review Metro Airport and Community Comprehensive Plans, so those long-term airport comprehensive plans and any environmental studies that come out of that as well. And then also then why we're here again today is to review MAC's Capital Improvement Program and review and approve any major capital projects that are also defined to have a significant effect on the orderly and economic development of the region. We'll kind of go through what those projects would be. And then here at the TAC, our role really is to review this and send any comments to forward those to the tab, and then finally to the Met Council for their consideration on their ultimate decision in January. So as I mentioned, we will kind of go over those significant effects criteria. So there's 2 real triggers in the CIP that kind of brings you to a higher level review. It's either that project costs, so projects over $5 million at MSP and over $2 million at the reliever airports that also have one of these potential significant effects criteria. It's the location of a new airport, so we build a new airport in the region, any new runways at an existing airport, any extensions of an existing runway, any runway strengthening other than routine maintenance that would imply larger aircraft are utilizing those runways, any new or expanded passenger handling services or parking facilities which represent a 25% or more increase in capacity, and then also any land acquisition which would be associated with any of the criteria above, or that would cause any relocation of residential or business activities near an airport. Moving on to the actual review. So we do not have any projects like that this year to review and actually approve. But overall for the CIP, you know, in our review at the staff level, we found that there was an adequate public participation process. It was a pretty robust process to go through public hearings and submit any time needed for public comment at all for the CIP. Included that is what's known as the assessment of environmental effects, as that is a requirement for these CIP items that kind of assess those 2026 items and if they need any environmental studies to be completed. That document has been completed and reviewed. MAC CIP also identifies adequate funding through the process to actually fund these projects that they've identified. Also, MAC CIP is now consistent with the 2050 TPP. I think this is probably the first year I think we said 2050, so it's the new one, but MAC CIP is consistent with that 2050 TPP. As I mentioned a little bit ago, the 2050 Regional Aviation Plan update is in this public comment phase, actually just finished the public comment phase, but that update of the document does not actually impact any existing airport development review requirements, and so we can assume that this CIP is consistent with that 2050 TPP. As I mentioned, there is no CIP projects which require the council's approval in 2026. It's actually a pretty quiet year too. There's a few notable or larger notable projects in line for 2026. And we see that budget item here, about 500 million MSP and about 30 million relievers. So in the previous couple of years, we've seen over $1 billion in projects at MSP. So as you can see, and relatively, it's a quiet year for MAC and at the airports in 26. I do want to highlight a couple projects here. If you're going to the airport next year, you might be seeing these happen around your entrance to the airport facilities. As I mentioned, a majority of those 26 projects are routine maintenance, equipment replacement, or multi-year projects, which have been seen in previous CIPs. Do have a few of these notable ones here I just want to point out. So you see here Post Road. So if you get off that interchange at Minnesota 5 going towards Terminal 2, there'll be a full reconstruction of Post Road, which will include new bicycle facilities to match what we see on 34th Avenue, which is that kind of straight edge here. So we're getting a bike connection, getting closer and closer to actually getting connected to that overall system. And so it's an exciting way to get there. So one day you build a bike to the airport. I think that'd be fun. Also, we have a 34th Avenue rehabilitation, so kind of where the blue line runs south into Bloomington here, that'll be a pavement rehab project, not a full reconstruction, but a pavement rehab project. Terminal 2 will actually see some roadway capacity expansions, so there'll be an extra lane will be constructed at Terminal 2 to provide pickup and drop-off capacity for that terminal. Terminal 1 will see new median and signage improvements, so as you're driving into Terminal 1, you'll see a brand new signage and median improvements actually make that experience a little nicer. In a connector to that too, all the parking garages will be receiving signage guidance updates. So, you'll be able to see exactly how many spaces are available and kind of where you need to be parking when you're driving to the airport. Finally, there'll be a pretty large expansion of the electric vehicle charging network at the airport, about $2 million project to add additional EV charging locations at both terminals. So just some projects you might see at MSP if you're going to the airport next year. One of the projects I do want to highlight, so this is Flying Cloud, the new air traffic control tower. So this is a major project that we saw in that Flying Cloud long-term comprehensive plan that came through, and really a big project for the airport to kind of set up the stage for future projects. But however, this project is not in the CIP. So this is a major project, but it's not in the CIP, and that's the reason because it's going to be fully funded and constructed by the Federal Aviation Administration next year. Estimated to be about a $24 million project. It doesn't require MAC council approval because it's not a MAC actual project. It's one that will be funded and constructed by the FAA. But as I mentioned, this is a major project which will really be a key driver for future projects at Flying Cloud as this tower will be moved kind of out of the way so to improve those visibility for the runways, and then which will allow for that large hangar development on the south side of the airfield when those visibility issues are solved with the new ATCC tower. One more note here, FAA did also complete an environmental assessment for the project this year and also received a finding of no significant impact with that. Looking ahead to future years, so 27 to 23, we are start seeing some larger projects kind of come back on the horizon at MSP. So the orange and purple ramps, so your two ramps at Terminal 2, will see an expansion for about $140 million in 2027. A new cargo development is being also identified for the west side of the airport, which will be a $30 million project in 27. The green and gold ramps, so those two major ramps at Terminal 1 are really near in their life, the replacement age of themselves, and will be scheduled for replacement in 2030, about a $400 million project. So that'd be a pretty major project MSP will be getting into future years. Then also we'll be seeing a large concourse and hub tram replacements. So those trams that kind of circle Terminal 1 will need to be replaced as well in 2031, and that'll be a very large project as well. We're also looking forward to one project coming up soon that will require Met Council approval, which will be the Air Lake Airport runway 1230 extension. We've kind of been in future years for a while with that. It's coming stuck in environmental review, but you know, we're assuming it'll be coming in 27. It'll be coming something for us to review and approve next year. So with that said, I'll just read out the recommended motion before leaving any comments, but we would recommend that the Technical Advisory Committee recommend to the TAB that the acceptance of the staff analysis of MAC's 26-2030 CIP is consistent with the Transportation Policy Plan and included adequate public participation, and forward these comments to the Metropolitan Council for its consideration. That said, I'll open up to any questions. Did see Bridget is here too as well, so she can help out with any answers too.
All right, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Gina. Bridget, anything you want to add or just field questions?
You guys know I could talk about the airport for an hour, so I'll just field questions.
Wonderful, thank you. I do just have to mention, I had to chuckle a little bit. I think Mr. Whiting put it well when he said relative, it looks like a small program, but when you see 502 million, that's a big program. So I know you guys deal with B's instead of M's. With that, Russ, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Maybe it's a question for Bridget. I know that FAA sounds like they're going to provide complete funding for the air traffic control tower for Flying Cloud. I'm just wondering long-term, as far as maintenance of that building, repairs, replacement of that building, is that going to become a Met Council responsibility or a MAC responsibility?
The building will remain ownership of the FAA, and it'll be their responsibility to take care of it.
Great.
And I really
All
hope
right.
it's not as ugly as the photo shows. We have no control over that, but that is not what I would have designed.
So there's no expectation for future costs, responsibilities by MAC for that facility?
That's correct. When we did the St. Paul Tower, that was many, many years ago, we did have a role in part of the parking lot and some of the fencing. There might be a little bit of that falls under our purview if it's outside of the leasehold, but the FAA will have a lease and be responsible for everything inside of it.
Okay, and my purpose for asking the question is we have similar scenarios in Egan with the county creating trails and greenway systems that they're responsible for, but then we have to provide winter, trail plowing and stuff. So it's just something that I don't want this to be a loss as far as any cost responsibilities on the MAC's part. So thank you for the explanation.
All right, thank you. Next, I see we have Charles has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, I thought I saw on the planned projects a rehabilitation of 34th Avenue. I presume that's a public road. Like, whose jurisdiction is that? And is there a cost share for that jurisdiction, and are they on board and aware of it?
So we consider 34th Avenue a private roadway for airport access, similar to Post Road. So we're taking on the cost for it. We do have a share agreement with Bloomington with regard to signalization. And I think some of the snow plowing boundaries around the Divergent Diamond and interchange. We have some agreements about how that's handled, but this will be a MAC cost. And we're timing it in conjunction with the planned outages by Metro Transit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Innocent?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Bridget, in the presentation is showing that the 2026 projects, CIP projects, none of them meet the environmental requirement or in terms of the funding, but the one shown for 2027 to 2032 has a lot of major projects and that will meet the environmental requirement. So will that be assessed next year?
So for now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that would be the environmental assessment will be done next year for those ones for 2027.
Yes, for projects that have the environmental requirement. So as we look at this particular list, the orange and purple parking ramp expansion technically doesn't trip any of the EAW requirements. Now, whether or not we decide to do one, because we like to do the right thing, we'll determine that. The West Cargo development will require an EAW. The green and gold parking ramp replacement, we absolutely will have environmental reviews associated with that. Whether it goes beyond an EAW at this point, we haven't determined. And then what we've noted for the concourse and hub tram replacement, significant project. If we replace in kind in the same alignment, it's not going to trip that requirement. But if we go with a new alignment or something majorly different as it relates to our trams, then absolutely we'll have to do those reviews. Now, I can't tell you that those reviews are all going to happen next year. They'll happen before construction starts. And so we'll work them into the schedule as appropriate, depending on the ultimate timing for construction. And the Air Lake Airport runway is a federal EA. We can't get the FAA to start the time clock on that one yet. We're still working through some utilities and a couple other items with that, but that one will be a combination federal environmental assessment and state EAW.
Right. Thanks a lot for the expansion of the EV charging station network. The Washington Airport, they've been doing a lot of sustainable development around the area. So thanks a lot for that.
You're welcome. Joe did mention that part of that project does include replacing the chargers that we currently have. There are a number of them that aren't working right now. So we will be replacing those. Although, just for the group's awareness, I drive a hybrid Jeep Wrangler and I got the Jeep recall letter on my battery. It literally says, do not charge your battery and do not park indoors. So, the industry is struggling, let me just say.
Oh. All right, thank you.
Right.
Thank
you.
Any additional questions for the team? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Oh, I heard Brian, and then we also had
I'll
Paul.
second it. I'll second it. This is Paul.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Any further conversation? Otherwise, we'll move to roll call on this. Go ahead, Mr. Barbeau.
Chair, McPherson.
Aye.
Robjit. Labrie.
Aye.
Ellos.
Aye.
Isaacson.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Leitner.
Aye.
Mathis.
Aye.
Schulte.
Aye.
Lucher.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Culver.
Aye.
Hartzell.
Aye.
Homey.
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Vale.
Aye.
Dick Peterson.
Aye.
Owens.
Aye.
On.
Aye.
Fighton.
Aye.
Sabota.
Aye.
Turner Bargan.
Aye.
Reef.
Abstaining for my own item, thank you.
Boylan. McCartney.
Aye.
AO.
Aye.
Steve Peterson. Otsukos.
Aye.
Chair, that's 26 ayes and an abstention.
All right, thank you, Joe. Thank you for the detailed update with the projects. Next, we'll turn over to Chair Medico for the next item.
Thanks, Chair. So the next item we had at TAC Planning was the annual adoption of the 2026 roadway safety performance targets. So this item we had come before us a couple of different times. Staff presented two actual options for us to consider. One would have the targets be consistent with MnDOT's strategic highway safety plan, and one would have the targets meet the Met Council's own TPP. In the end, and after some discussion, TAC planning recommended going forward with the option that would utilize the TPP targets, which results in some very specific numbers and targets for various items, which are in the action transmittal, and I think Heidi will go through in the presentation. So I will turn it over to Heidi then for the details. I will note there was one change in the detailed items in terms of serious injuries per 100 million VMT. That item, and when tech planning voted on it, was just slightly different. There was a recalculation. So I think it went from, when we saw it, it was presented as 1.52, and that has changed to 1.55. So just a calculation error there. So thanks, Heidi. I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm in place of Jed Hansen today, who is on leave. And just wanted to give an overview. Have a little bit different context too for this kind of annual item that you may be used to hearing, those of you who've been on the committee for a while. In the past, we've gotten some questions kind of just in relation to this and the context to the other measures that we have in the transportation performance program. So we basically have 3 levels of performance measures: federal, state, and regional measures. Those reflect the different priorities at the planning at the different levels. This is one of our federal measures, and those are typically required by statute or regulation and have really defined methods, reporting, and update cycles, whereas our state measures and regional measures are included in our planning products, and those may have varied update and update cycles. Okay, my slide is not moving. Slide is not moving. Can you see the measures by mode?
I'm not
No,
sure.
not
No.
yet. Not yet.
It does stop working. Sorry about that.
Want me to share my screen there, Heidi?
If you don't mind, that might be faster. I'm not sure why
Okay.
it's stopped. Can you take over?
Yep. Want this one here?
Actually, can't see.
Slide 4.
Yeah, we're seeing the measures by mode and rule that Steve pulled up.
Okay, thanks. I'm stuck where thank you. Okay, now I can see that. Thank you. Sorry about that. So with the this just shows in the context we have, even within the federal measures, we have different required measures. They're separated out by mode, roadways and transit. And then we have different ones. Safety is one shown in the upper left corner. That's one we'll be talking about today. But sometimes we'll get questions about the other ones. We're not going to go into those today, but just wanted to show it to you in the overall context. Next slide, please. So really the main question is, why are we hearing about safety every year, usually, and not some of these other measures that are also important ones? That really ties to those federally defined intervals. So right now, safety is required to be adopted and reported on every year, whereas our other roadway measures are every 4 years for adoption and reporting every 2 years. The transit ones are typically reported directly by the transit providers, and those are really keyed more to actions rather than specific time intervals. I'll note there was a proposal in the previous administration to make the safety performance measures more consistent in intervals with the other ones for roadways. That was not finalized in the previous administration. So with the change in federal administrations, we've not heard an update on that. So we're still on the annual cycle for that. Next slide, please. So again, just as a refresher, what we're talking about today for the safety performance measures, the purpose of those are to help us inform our planning and programming work to reduce fatal and serious injuries. And they also at the federal level help track performance of the Federal Highway Safety Improvement Program. So we have 5 measures: number of all fatalities, number of all serious injuries, that's for all modes. We have rates for each of those per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And then we have a subset of those all fatalities and all serious injuries, where it's a combined total of fatal and serious injuries for bicycling and pedestrians. Next slide, please. So for MPOs, we must set a target for each of the 5 measures. We can do this at the regional level or support the statewide targets. That council has typically been setting regional targets, and we must do this by the end of February each year. So sometimes there's a question that comes up for MPOs. We are not specifically evaluated by the Federal Highway Administration as far as how we are doing in relation to the targets. That is different for the state DOTs, where they have some different implications if they are not meeting the targets. Next slide, please. Again, just briefly, the really kind of how we're using the targets in practice, kind of what some of the primary application of that is really to helping inform those policymaker conversations, kind of about how we're doing overall on safety as a region, and help elevate this issue in consideration of as we do our other planning and programming work. Next slide, please. So as Chair Medico mentioned, this year we had to reevaluate how we were setting these targets. Previously, we had been setting the targets in relation to the state strategic highway safety plan. So that plan had kind of a medium-term goal on the way to 0 for the entire state. And so we were basically tying the targets to the regional share of that goal. That plan was updated earlier this year. And when they did that update, they basically held that medium-term goal for the next 5 years flat, so the same as the previous one. So that really prompted us to kind of reevaluate, should we continue to do this or do we need to look at doing something different? We also updated, of course, the transportation policy plan as well for the 2050 time horizon. That does have an objective to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on our roads by 2050. So we did consult with kind of a smaller group of people focused on safety, as well as with TAC planning, and kind of heard a slight preference for connecting that to the transportation policy plan, recognizing that ultimately this is really a policy choice, but also there's some advantage of that just being a clear connection toward that eventual goal of 0 as well, and just making that connecting clear to the regional plan. Next slide, please. This just really kind of outlines mostly what I was talking about with kind of the differences in the 2 approaches. If we had remained kind of tied to the strategic highway safety plan, since that goal is being held the same, there's a chance that could be interpreted, those would be kind of held a little bit more flat then, and so that could be viewed by some as sending a message of it's okay if we're not making progress. I think there's always some tension really with these performance measures of having those significant gaps with what's actually happening on the ground versus what the targets are saying we should be doing if we want to be achieving our goals. But there's always also that consideration of not wanting to send a message of having increasing targets or not seeing progress as well. Next slide, please. Actually, you can skip the next 2. These are just showing how we calculate those. If anybody really wants those, we can go into those. But this just shows the actual numbers for the targets, which again should be in your action transmittal for the recommendation for tying this to the TPP, which is the goal of 0 by 2050. This shows it in comparison to the 3-year average for the years that we have final performance. Basically, I'll read through the targets at the end when we have the motion, but it kind of just gives you the comparison of how we're doing. The next 3 slides are basically just kind of that reflection of comparison. So the black lines are the actual numbers. The green line on the chart is the option connecting it to the TPP. The blue one was the SHSP option, basically holding it flat. With fatalities, obviously, as we all know, this is something that spikes considerably with the when COVID started, with the peak in 2021, has come down somewhat from that peak, but it's not kind of a clear trend yet at this point. Next slide, please. With serious injuries, we also kind of saw a reversal going in the wrong direction with serious injuries with the beginning of COVID, and those have remained elevated. Next slide, please. And then similar for pedestrian and bicycle, combined fatalities and serious injuries, where there had been more on a downward trend, and then that trend has reversed. Last year was a higher number for this combined measure. Next slide, please. So just taking a look at how we're doing so far year to date through the end of October. Although this data on this slide specifically is just the 7-county metro, it's a little tougher kind of mid-year to pull out those urbanized portions of Wright and Sherburne. But just to give you a glimpse of kind of how we've been doing this year, kind of combined compared to the previous 3-year average, we are down overall a little bit on fatalities. Serious injuries, a slight 1% increase over that 3-year average. And then the combined bike ped fatal and serious injuries has a higher increase at 4% over that 3-year average. I will note all of these when we take a look at these in comparison to where we were before COVID started. All of these are elevated over that 3-year average from 2017 to 2019. So even though we may kind of see some decreases or slighter increases in the recent trend, when we really kind of put it into that overall context of where we were, it's still up in a concerning way. Next slide, please. These won't go into detail on the next 2 slides, but MnDOT's Strategic Highway Safety Plan does have focus areas based on data throughout the state. And we worked with them to take a look at what those trends look like in these focus areas for the metro. So these numbers, I will emphasize, pretty much all the other numbers you're seeing in here are represent actual people. These numbers are based on crashes involving fatal or serious injuries, not people. So there's a little bit different on the next 2 slides. Basically, inattention is the one focus area for the metro that there is a slight downward trend. Excuse me. The other focus areas that have more of an increased trend are for pedestrians, bicyclists, older drivers, intersections, head-on, and trains, even though you can see from the numbers, train numbers are very, very small. So really any change in those becomes more noticeable. And then the next slide, please, includes the other Strategic Highway Safety Plan emphasis or focus areas that do not necessarily have clear trends at this time for the metro. Next slide, please. Really, as you all know, like for us to make real progress on these numbers, it takes a lot of partners across a really broad intersection of fields and areas. And using the safe system approach, which USDOT has been promoting and we have included in the transportation policy plan, is really that kind of holistic approach to being able to work with all partners to really get to systemic issues so that we don't have anyone dying or seriously injured while traveling in any mode. With our work as an MPO, obviously the areas that we intersect with more are the safe roads and safe speeds, kind of more specifically tied with our regional infrastructure investments. Next slide. Very briefly, some of the safety planning work that we're doing in addition to the targets at the MPO has included the regional safety action plan, some of which is kind of pulling into the regional solicitation evaluation that you'll hear more from Steve in the info item, and how to implement that and really elevate safety as a consideration in our investments. And also was also part of the transportation policy plan update for 2050. That plan also includes a number of actions that are directing changes both in our investments and in our work program. And so some of those upcoming work program items that relate to safety include safer connections to transit study that we're actually reviewing proposals on right now. That's a follow-up on the pedestrian safety analysis that showed kind of proximity to transit stops, a really key area for pedestrian fatal and serious injury crashes. And so that will be doing some additional work on how we can use roadway and transit investments and operations to help us really move the needle on pedestrian safety. The pedestrian bicycle demand estimation tool, that project will be creating a tool to estimate existing activity and latent demand for these modes to help local governments prioritize where to focus investments in people biking and walking. This project has just very recently kicked off, and so is starting. The Complete Streets Local Implementation Guide will provide guidance for integrating safety and multimodal improvements in projects that is sensitive to land use context and different roadway functions. That project is still in the scoping stage at this point. And then lastly, we have the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network Rural Connections Project that will evaluate how to connect the RBTN to rural center communities. Next slide, please. Of course, really, it's all of you and local agencies who are the ones that own and maintain these roadways and facilities that are doing a lot of the key work to help move this forward. There's no way we could try to capture everything that's being done on the slide, but did just at least want to kind of point to that. MnDOT's doing a lot in safety, but did want to acknowledge the Strategic Highway Safety Plan update earlier this year. That's kind of a guiding document for a lot of that work. And of course, all of you are doing a lot of really critical work with your own facilities. And we're really happy to see when our local partners are able to get funding through the Federal Safe Streets and Roads for All program, where we've seen a fair amount of success, hopefully more. I know we had more applications for this year funding, where we've had about $40 million in the region for both planning and implementation funds come to really help move that focus forward on safety. So hopefully with the remaining years in that program, we can see more of that funding come to the region and help address this issue. And then just one of the other newer aspects is we do have a statewide advisory council on traffic safety that's also working, partners across all of the areas, and that does include some of our local partners as well on this committee representing cities and counties, and trying to have all of the partners really pull together in the same direction so we can really make a difference in this. Next slide, please. So the next steps after today's meeting, we'll be taking this to TAB later this month, and that would go to the council with the Transportation Committee and the full council in January for us to meet our deadline of forwarding this to MnDOT by the end of February. Next slide, please. So the recommended motion that we have before you today is that the Technical Advisory Committee recommend that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend adoption of the 2026 roadway safety performance targets, which advance a long-term goal of 0 deaths. The number of fatalities will be no more than 71. The fatal injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, no more than 0.25. Number of all serious injuries, no more than 445. Number of serious injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, no more than 1.55. And pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities and serious injuries, no more than 110. I will note there is just a brief technical correction on the rates between TAC planning and this one. So I did just want to note that that's called out in the action transmittal. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions if you have them. Otherwise, we would be looking for a motion on this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. A lot of detailed information. With that, any questions on this item? Otherwise, we'd entertain a motion.
So moved, Howley.
Thanks,
Lissa will
Charles.
second.
Thanks, Lissa. We have a first and a second. Any additional comments or questions? Otherwise, this will go to roll call. Mr. Barbeau?
Chair McPherson.
Aye.
Robjan.
Aye.
Labrie.
Aye.
Ellos.
Aye.
Isaacson.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Leitner.
Aye.
Mathis.
Aye.
Schulze. Sorry.
Aye.
Lucher.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Tolver.
Aye.
Hartzell.
Aye.
Homie.
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Hager,
Aye.
Mayel,
Aye.
Nick Peterson,
Aye.
Collins, Collins, on,
Aye.
Fighton,
Aye.
Sabota,
Aye.
Turner Bergen,
Abstain.
Reef,
Aye.
Boylan, Boylan, McCartney,
Aye.
Yo,
Aye.
Steve Peterson, Steve Peterson,
Aye.
Otsukos.
Aye.
Chair, that's 26 ayes and an abstention.
All right, thank you, Joe. That item is approved. One comment I was going to make on this regarding safety is I know that our agency's been watching closely with that pilot program with the speed enforcement cameras that are in play right now. And if I heard correctly on the radio, I think it was last week, they were seeing a 30% reduction with speeders based on some of the criteria they're looking at, if I heard that correctly. So pretty staggering number there for the short amount of time they've been in place. And I don't know if others would be interested, but it'd be interesting to hear from that agency. I believe it's Minneapolis, and then was there one other agency that was allowed to try them out? I can't
Mendota
remember
Heights.
the
Dakota Heights.
Yeah, Mendota Heights. So with that, I would love to hear more about that as you continue on with the program, because that is something I think all of us deal with. And speeding is a big issue on some of the severity of these crashes. So just a sidebar comment.
Yeah, we'd be happy to give a presentation at any point on what we know to date.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thank you for this item. Thanks, Heidi, for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Chair, any additional comments from the Planning Committee?
No, I will just note, Chair, that we will be meeting, TAC Planning will meet in December. We have a few information items. So for no action items planned, but we will meet on next Thursday, the 11th.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll move on to the big guy, Jim. Chair Kosucher.
Mr. Chair, funding and programming met on November 20th and had one item recommended for TAC approval. That's Action Transmittal 2025-43 in the agenda packet. It's a program year extension request for Hennepin County's Marshall Street Northeast Phase 2 reconstruction project. That's CASA 23. It was supported by funding and programming. It was the item also has support from City of Minneapolis and MnDOT. It's due to a change of an adjacent project schedule that moves this project 1 year further out, and the change in program year is not an exception to the program year policy. So it was approved, and I think staff would have answer any more detailed questions that anyone might have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chad, anything you want to add on this one? Or any team members on this one?
Sure. Just to reemphasize, lots of projects going on in this area of Northeast Minneapolis by Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and MnDOT, and really just trying to align construction schedules, and some other projects we're moving around. So this fits nicely in there to move this 1 year to allow the phase 1 project to Marshall Street to finish up, and stand for any questions.
Okay. Try and avoid some construction fatigue in that area. All right. Any questions from the members here? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval. This is Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have a second?
Peterson.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. All right. We have a first and a second. Any additional discussion? Otherwise, we'll move to roll call. Joe?
For the last time today, McPherson,
Aye.
Robjit, Labrie,
Aye.
Ellos,
Aye.
Isaacson,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Leitner,
Aye.
Mathis,
Aye.
Schulze,
Aye.
Kozlucher,
Aye.
Howley,
Aye.
Culver,
Aye.
Hartzell,
Aye.
Omi,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Hager,
Aye.
Mayo,
Aye.
Nick Peterson,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
On,
Aye.
Fighton,
Aye.
Sabota,
Aye.
Turner Bergen,
Aye.
Reef,
Aye.
Boylan, McCartney,
Aye.
AO,
Aye.
Peterson, Steve,
Aye.
and Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair 27 ayes, no noes or abstentions.
All right, thank you, Joe. That item is approved. That's it for action items for funding and programming. Mr. Klasucher, anything additional you want to add as far as funding and programming is concerned?
And we're looking ahead toward our meeting on the 18th. We're gonna have some pretty heavy, I guess, heavy workload for that meeting. So hoping to have everybody there if we can.
Yeah, good point. I think, like we mentioned earlier, that first batch of action items associated with the regional solicitation came through last month. And so, looking at January here for TAC, you guys are the first stop. So I know it's a lot of work, but we'll talk a little bit more about that here in 1 second. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Next, we'll move into our information item, our last item on the agenda here. So preview of the January regional solicitation action items. Steve, you and Molly, the show is yours.
Okay, thank you. Molly, we'll kick it off here.
Yep, thank you. All right. Joe Barbeau,
Joe-
you're gonna share your PowerPoint.
I am
hopefully?
sharing, and it wasn't sharing the big one with me, so. There we go, I think this is right.
Perfect. We'll go to the next slide. All right, well, appreciate everyone's time today to give you an update. As Joe mentioned, we have some action items coming up here for this group to consider next month. So we're going to preview them today and then spend some time talking through the community considerations criteria, and then give you an update on some of the changes that have been made to the applications based on the feedback we have received in the last couple of weeks here. Next slide. So as a reminder, we have second set of action items coming here in January. TAC F&P, we'll see those on the 18th of December, and then TAC here on the 7th of January, and the in-person meeting planned right after the first of the year. Next slide. A little update since last time we've been in front of this group. We met with funding and programming on the 20th, mostly previewed the upcoming December action items that I mentioned will be on their agenda on the 18th here. There was discussion around the year-round maintenance requirements and regional bike facility scoring. I have some slides coming up here on that. Also discussed the bridge application. We also reconvened the safety special issue working group to discuss their input on the community consideration percentage points for that application. There was a lot of feedback, or some feedback received specifically on the safety application about that criteria. So wanted to get that group's thoughts on that. We did end up getting mixed reactions from that group, so there wasn't consensus either way to change the percentage. There was some discomfort from the group about having a funding priority for the safety application. And then there was consensus from the group to reduce some of the scoring, or change some of the scoring for the proactive application. So I'll touch on those momentarily here. Next slide.
Finally, we met with the technical steering committee on the last month on the 25th. Similar to the other groups, we had some mixed reactions to the community consideration percentage. So we're again bringing that forward for this group to consider and discuss. There was consensus from that group to have the year-round winter maintenance requirement that has been in the application previously as part of the 24 solicitation only apply to the federal regional bike trail application and not the active transportation one, which is the local facilities application. We did make some updates based on their feedback to the regional bike facilities and bridge connections applications, which I'll touch on here again momentarily. And then there was consensus from that group to have a funding priority only be one project per cycle and no funding priority for the 2 safety applications. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Amy, I believe, is going to go through our community considerations criteria.
Sure, thanks, Molly. So I'm going to be pretty high level here because I think a couple months ago we did go into this criteria in some detail. But just as a reminder, we have been working with a separate consulting team on some of this work. The consultant team is Bellwether along with Bolton and Menk. And they were the consultant team that also worked with us in the past on a project called the Equity Evaluation of Transportation Investments. And with that project, we worked with a community-based group. We called it the Equity Policy Group. They came up with a lot of recommendations on our transportation processes. Not all of it focused on regional solicitation type work, but we are trying to simultaneously bring in some of the recommendations of that group. And then I also wanted to recognize that we had a special interest working group that worked on this criteria that met 5 times and really discussed this in depth. And we're trying to honor the input of both the equity policy group, the special interest group, and then also recognize the input that we're continuing to receive from you, our technical partners. So with that, a quick reminder, equity and inclusiveness is one of the 5 regional goals. It was part of our 2040 regional plan. Continues to be one of the 5 goals in our 2050 plan. Also, as part of the 2050 plan, the council adopted what they call a regional equity framework. And that framework really has 3 pieces to it. That work with community should be people-centered, driven by data that we have about the community and that's brought into the decision-making. That we should work with the community and prioritize engagement with overburdened communities. And that when we're implementing projects, we should make sure that the benefits of those projects accrue to overburdened communities and that those benefits go beyond just mitigating the harm of the project. And so the reason I bring up this equity framework is when we get to the specific measures here, you'll see that we tried to pull that in to the recommended measures for community considerations. If you want to go to the next slide, Molly. All right. As a reminder, we are proposing, I shouldn't say we, the special interest group proposed 3 measures in this area. The first is around demonstrating community data and context, and that strong applications will show, demonstrate data beyond census level data and really show a clear kind of nuanced understanding of the community that you're working in. The second measure, and you'll note here that we have made changes to this measure, is it used to be called community engagement. It has been refocused on community need and now future engagement, so that this measure is really focused on demonstrating where the need, why is this project coming forward, what community need is it addressing, how do you know that the community has that need, does the community support implementation of something that will address that need. And then the second piece of this measure is also indicating the type of engagement and how community will be brought along in future work on a project. And then the third piece of the community considerations is the community benefits measure. And that really is looking at the benefits that are being given by the project to the community and how that specifically addresses the community need that was identified. And what you can see in these three measures is that we're really trying to address the three pieces of the equity framework that are contained in the 2050 plan. Next slide. All right, so we have, after the work of the special interest group, we've been receiving comments. Some of the comments we think we've fairly well addressed. We heard, as I said earlier, that there were a lot of concerns about particularly the word engagement, and that we needed to recognize that when these projects are being applied for, that in-depth engagement really has not yet occurred with the community. So we have refocused that measure to focus on community need and how the community need was determined. That might come through long-range planning. It might come from work with the community. It might come from previous work that has occurred within the community, and from a whole variety of planning efforts. So we're focusing on really the why of the project, why this project, what need is it trying to address for the community, and then, as I said earlier, what is the future engagement that will take place. So there have been some major revisions to that piece of the community considerations measures. The other piece of feedback that we have heard is how should the criteria be weighted across categories. We've really had mixed feedback on this issue. Our special interest working group really was pretty strong that they felt the 20% weighting across all application categories was appropriate, and that we should be consistent across the application categories. I think this issue, we're still hearing about it, and we're going to continue to talk about it with the policymaker work group this month, and also with our council members who have a lot of input on this issue too. And we are going to the Transportation Committee next Monday to get feedback from our council members. And then will the funding priority, maybe, why don't you go to the next slide here, Molly? As you'll remember, part of the community considerations beyond just scoring the three measures, there has been a proposal that because community considerations as a goal does not have a separate category the way some of the other regional goals do, that we were approaching it a little bit differently, and we were proposing what was called funding priority, whereby any project that received the highest possible score, a high score across the three measures, would be given priority for funding. And that proposal really came about because it kind of set up a separate category for community considerations, and it gave an opportunity for projects that scored really well on community considerations, but maybe that were smaller in nature and didn't score quite as highly on some of the other measures, but still was a good project, had an opportunity to get funded through community considerations. And there was a lot of discomfort with that proposal. So at the last policy maker work group, we did revise the proposal a little bit. The first was that we are proposing that no more than one priority project could be selected across the entire solicitation. So that really, I think earlier we were proposing 3 projects, so that's gone from 3 to 1. And then the second piece of this is that we heard a lot of discomfort with the idea that a safety project, which maybe hadn't scored highly on the technical criteria, could be brought up and funded anyway. And so we are excluding the safety categories from the funding priority. And that is the current proposal that will continue to be discussed by our policymaker group. If you want to go to the next slide. Is that the last slide? Oh, well, if you want to go back there, one other thing I wanted to point out was a little bit about the process that we will use as the funding priority comes forward. As you know, council staff develops funding scenarios that we bring forward for consideration by TAC and TAB. And so under the funding priority, the process would be that under each scenario, we would determine whether there were any high ranked projects. And some of those projects under each scenario will rank high enough that they would otherwise be funded. So we will only identify those projects that kind of fall on the marginal line, and the funding could go either way. And those are the projects that we would bring forward for TAB to consider as to whether they want to give those projects a funding priority, and if so, which projects. And so we might have our base funding scenario with one project that is proposed for the funding priority. We might have a safety oriented scenario. Under that, there likely would not be a project proposed for a funding priority. We might have a multimodal focused options. And so each funding scenario would bring forward which projects are kind of at the margin and might not otherwise be funded without the funding priority. And then the final decision really would be upon TAB to consider whether they want to give a funding priority to one of those projects. And as I indicated earlier, it would not exceed more than one project under each scenario. So with that, we can take any questions about this.
Yeah, are there any questions from the group? Brian?
Yeah, good morning. I'm wondering, Amy, if we cast our minds forward a few years and we have a project that was selected based on, or significantly based on these criteria, if how we deal with, say, a scope change as it relates to this criteria?
Are you, I'm trying to think this through. Are you saying as to whether it's changing?
So let's say, as an example, a project selects, I mean, I'm going to pick a simple one and say, let's say a project selects a roundabout rather than a signal improvement. And over the course of time, and that was well supported by the community as based on these criteria. And then over time, the project develops. Now it's no longer a roundabout for technical reasons. How does that affect the scope change discussion?
Sure. So I want to go back to the community need piece here. So when we're talking about the community need and engagement with community, it's not on the project detail, I would say. In the project you're focusing on here is there clearly was a safety need, right?
Yep.
Like the project came forward, there is a need in a community for a safety project, maybe for a whole variety of reasons. Maybe there's a community of youth that can't cross the street to get to
Yep.
their school, or
Yep.
so focusing on the need, not the details of the project, is what we're asking for in the second measure here. So as the project moves forward and engages the community, which it should, projects will change based on the community input on the specifics of the project, but that is not what this measure is really focusing on. This measure is focusing on, why are you proposing a project for this community? What is the need that it's based in? How do you know about that need? What did you hear from the community? And so we're not asking, did you hear, do they want a roundabout or do they want a signal? We're asking, what did you hear about the safety need and why there's a problem and an issue here, and how is that problem affecting them as a community? So it's not based in the detail of the project.
Right. I'm just saying, like, I think at this moment we're in an academic kind of position on it, and I think when we get to a scope change, I think it's going to be challenging, because I think that's going to be part of the narrative as to whether this was the right type of scoring or not.
I would push back on that. I would not expect that we would come back and somehow relook at this scoring. What I would ask on a scope change is, what are you hearing from community now? You know, why are you making this scope change? And I'm hoping a lot of scope changes are actually coming forth, because when you do get into the detail of a project, you're hearing something from community that's making you rethink how the project was originally proposed. And so I think beyond this scoring, every scope change that comes forward, we should ask the question of, what does the community think of this? And is this coming forward because of community input that you received? And if so, that would make it a stronger argument for a scope change.
Fair enough. Mr. Chair, could I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering how we're defining harms. Is there some place where we're defining that, and that's the measure that we're up against here?
There is not a harms measure in here. There's a benefits measure. What are the benefits that the community is receiving, and is it addressing the need? If you go back to your safety example, this community told us, you know, they can't get from here to there, they can't cross the street. This project is providing the benefit of slowing traffic down and whatever, and helping them access their destination. And what we're saying here is that the benefits, it's not a benefit to demonstrate that a project won't harm a community. Oftentimes we bring projects forward and we say, well, this project, you know, won't cause additional safety issues or won't cause additional air pollution issues or whatever. So the harms reference here is that not causing a harm is not a benefit. We want to hear about true benefits to the community. We are doing, as you all know, a highway harms project that's looking in detail at harms, but we don't have the results of that project yet. And a year or two from now, we might be bringing some learning forward from that work, but it's not yet embedded in this proposal.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Lissa?
Amy, you mentioned that there's been some technical input on the scoring percentages, but that you're going to chat with the policymaker work group. There's the county staff all met earlier this week, and we would like to talk about that here today. We think it would be very valuable for the policymaker work group to at least hear the technical input and that be presented to them. And I don't want the county staff to be the ones talking in a vacuum on this, and would like to get other TAC, knowing that there's not a technical steering committee for this ahead of the next policymaker work group. We thought it would be productive to have that discussion today. So Joe, if you're okay with that, I don't know if you want me to kind of talk through what the county's discussed and why.
Yeah, Alyssa, I think that'd be a good idea. Let me just double check. Steve, how much more after this item do you have to go over, just to make sure we're cognizant of time here? Because I do think it's valuable to talk about that.
Yeah, 5 minutes, probably.
Okay. Yeah, Alyssa, if you want to run into that, if you want to pull that up. Kyle, do you have a quick question or comment there?
Yes, I just had a question on the going back to like winter maintenance, on if there's, I know this is probably a tough question, but is there a known percentage of recent active transportation projects that aren't maintained in the winter? As I mean, winter can impact use of facilities for 4+ months out of the year. And I'm just wondering if that's taken into account on a scoring for roadway projects where sidewalks or trails are included where they weren't previously.
Steve, do you have is that?
Yeah, that's
maybe you
jumping
can
ahead
answer
to the
that?
next slides. Do you want me to answer that now, or do you want to wait till we conclude this little part?
Yeah, why don't we grab that question and then we'll turn it over to Alyssa here to walk through what the counties have discussed here.
Okay. Yeah, if you could jump ahead, Joe. There's a slide with yellow highlights on it. Yep, slide 16. So we have 2 slides on this topic here. Was that Kyle that asked the question, right?
Yep.
And so we talked about this at Funding and Programming, and then at the Technical Steering Committee last Tuesday about whether this should apply to just the federal funds or should also apply to the active transportation funds. And the group several people at the Technical Steering Committee wanted it just to apply to the federal funds. After the meeting, so Kyle, your question is, would this apply to a roadway project that's adding a trail? I think it should be amended, the language here, to include that. So after the meeting, Joe Whiting, who works on our active transportation, said to me, well, you kind of forgot we already had this discussion with the active transportation work group. And because the second bullet point there is the ability of the grantee to maintain the active transportation infrastructure following project completion. So that's one of the 7 requirements in the state legislation. And Joe Whiting had said, well, several months ago, the active transportation work group had talked about this already, and that it includes both kind of maintaining the project over its useful life and some level of winter maintenance. Was their interpretation of implementing this state requirement. So that's, I guess I had forgotten about that here too. And then we did add some of the other policy kind of basis behind it, both from ADA and from the TPP, which does ask our facilities to be maintained. So I think we would entertain some kind of light editing to the language here, but Joe Whiting did go back to the chair and the vice chair of the active transportation work group, and and did confirm that they would like some amount of snow removal and maintenance in the winter months to be included with the active transportation grants. So I do think the language could be tweaked a little bit here as what's shown, but that was some new information that I didn't have at my fingertips, I guess, at the Technical Steering Committee. So does that answer your question, Kyle?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And the other part of my question is which I assume this is probably tough, but if there's any knowledge on recent projects or the last round of solicitation on what percentage of those projects are not maintained, and what is, just to kind of know on the decision making for that, of like, how much of a problem is it? I know that, I mean, it's obviously a barrier. I mean, there's a number of facilities that don't get that. They don't get amended on plowing maps, and it's, I mean, there's 40% of the year that it's not available. So,
Yeah,
but I
that's a
assume
great,
that's a tough question to know.
yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair and Kyle. Good. I think that's a good question. Council staff isn't out there checking on this. We did receive actually one complaint that someone pointed back to an application saying that, hey, they committed to plowing this facility. Well, it's not being done. But we haven't been out checking on this now. And I think we'd have to probably gauge our partners on if we wanted to get that answer.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing here from a Washington County perspective? We are more concerned about this for the active transportation funding. So the state dollars that don't, in our read, don't explicitly require winter maintenance. And a whole goal from the policymakers' perspective, the entire time of developing that specific one has been to get more entities to apply for that money. But a lot of those entities that are smaller do not currently have the capacity or do winter maintenance. And so it seems like an uphill battle to still draw that hard line if we're trying to get more entities to apply. If we want to try to get these people to maintain in the future, sure, fine. But it seems like a requirement that's now going to rule half the municipalities in the metro area out again because they don't have the ability to do winter maintenance. They're just not set up for that. They don't have the equipment, staffing, et cetera. So that's where the county has been on this. Not globally across all of the regional solicitation.
Yeah. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. So in reference to this discussion, specifically to the active transportation funding and the projects funded therein, I think there's definitely probably a fine line and lots of nuance in this, as there is with many things. And I just wanted to speak up on the fact that at the end of the day, this is for transportation. Transportation needs to remain accessible to a reasonable degree year-round, and whatever form that needs to take in this, I don't know if it ends up being like a hard and fast qualifying criteria, if it's something that evolves over time, if it is, getting applicants to simply sign off affirming that they understand the rules and liabilities that apply to maintaining a transportation system, specifically active transportation, and wherein with shared use facilities, understanding that means that there is an accessible path of travel for pedestrians, which comes along with other requirements for maintaining that space. Steve, I know you referenced ADA, so perhaps that's being included in there. So just want to speak up on that side of things and make sure that we are, however it shakes out with the applications themselves, there needs to be a way to at least affirm the understanding of the responsibility of those facilities when they are implemented. Again, particularly because we're talking about transportation here, and that comes along with needing to make sure that that's usable in a year-round way in a snowy state, or maybe we're getting less snowy. I don't know. Right now it's more. Less in the future. Who knows? So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mackenzie, for those comments. I agree with you. And I think it's important when, we don't know the volume of projects that we'll submit to these categories, but thinking about the utility of funding a project with federal regional dollars that is able to be used for all seasons, and let alone the ADA requirements, right? I think that's something that we should be considerate of and value. And so I think it's an important piece that we are maintaining collectively. We are maintaining these projects that get funded throughout the entire year.
Okay, thank you. Russ.
Yeah, just to the last point, it's not actually, I guess, a point of value. I think all of us as local operators and managers of the trail system value the benefits that are being provided, and ideally we could provide them on an annual basis. But like some other speakers have already mentioned, it's an issue of reality on whether or not we can afford to buy the equipment or staff to actually maintain the trails, these additional trails. And, you know, Egan's a bigger community in the metro area, and we've got a pretty good number of equipment and staffing, but it's still an issue for us to take care of our entire system. We only maintain about 65% of our system, even though there is an interest by the council to maintain 100%. So it's you know, I guess it's something that annually the council looks into and considers, but from an operator's perspective, I just wanted to share that it's not necessarily something we don't want to do. It's something that we can't actually afford to do or manage with the staff we have. So that's just from a practitioner's perspective.
Okay, thank you. Kyle.
Maybe just a consideration would be have it, I know it's probably not a great time for that, but bringing it up, but maybe it's not necessarily a yes or no, it's a small scoring category where you can get a couple points if it is going to be maintained, rather than throwing projects out that won't be.
Yeah. Well, these are all good comments. Joe, Mr. Whiting, are you, I assume you're capturing some of this, bring this back to the chair and co-chair there?
Yep, I'm taking notes, and I'll and I believe Glenn will be probably watching as well. So
Okay. Mackenzie?
Thanks, Chair. I'll keep this one quick, but I think just last thing to tie it back to some of the prior discussions today around safety. These are our most vulnerable roadway users in our entire system and in the region. And so being able to move the needle on this in some way, and this isn't going to be the only way that happens, and it can't be. And so as we go forward as a region, I think just any opportunity available to help further support the local agencies that are doing this work and trying to balance these things, but not losing sight of the fact that with these being our most vulnerable roadway users, and when these facilities are not maintained and accessible, and that can be done a lot of different ways, prioritizing your system for that, for that in a way that, you know, maybe it isn't everything all the time, but being able to have a plan for that, because when these are not available, then people are put into positions where they make choices that put them at risk of life and limb at times. And so to tie it back again to the safety performance measures that we were discussing earlier, I don't want to lose sight of that, and that being a part of it as well. Frequently, a lot of agencies, will find a way to maintain expanded roadway systems at every turn. And then we are left trying to scramble and figure out how to do this with the active transportation system too often. And I'm really hopeful that everybody together, we can continue to work on this and find additional ways to make that happen in the region through this, as well as other future opportunities. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Mackenzie. I think we hit a nerve on this one. One general comment here I'm just going to make and maybe pose a question is, would you consider if a city, a smaller city, has a policy where the landowner is required to maintain that pedestrian facility in front of their house within 36 hours, would the team that's looking at this consider that as an approved policy? So I know, like in front of my house, City of Albertville, I'm in charge of clearing that sidewalk. It's there, the city's in charge of replacing it, but I maintain it during the winter. I'm the one responsible to plow that. Would that be considered a approved policy?
Yeah, I think if you go back one slide here, Joe Barbeau. Yeah, so the last part of that yellow highlight, or providing information on the current agency's current snow removal policy, such as if property owners or a separate agency are responsible for snow and ice clearance. So I think that would fall under that last stanza there, right, Joe Whiting?
Yes, we want to make that explicit carve out to cover that situation, right? Like in Minneapolis, even, right? I live on a sidewalk, I clear the sidewalk, right? So if Minneapolis came with the application to reconstruct a sidewalk, that would be the policy they'd cite, right? We're not expecting the city to clear that, like those kind of facilities. So I think this is a pretty low bar to set. Like you should have either property owners maintaining facilities, or if the city, county, state is maintaining those facilities. So that was the intention here, is to kind of allow for that nuance in kind of operations between property owners and cities.
Okay, thank you. All right, I see 3 hands up. Brian, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I was going to go to a similar place of maybe it's just discussion about level of service, whether it's 72 hours, 48 hours, 36 hours, or, under certain conditions that might be some gradation that would help for, so that it's not a yes or no. It's more of a, to what degree does it get, what is the level of service that's exercised in maintaining the passability of it.
Okay, yep, good point. Jim?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, we've been through this in a few different solicitation cycles, and, I also want to bring to the attention of the group that, we don't ask this question about roadways, but if you were to improve your roadway and then not maintain it in the winter, it would be kind of absurd. So I think you're establishing a public improvement, and it should be available to the public all year round in some fashion. And I think to Brian's question, yeah, you could do that and get really specific, but I think then we're splitting hairs, and that's really, creates a little bit of burden, for those agencies that just are trying to work it out. And as Alyssa stated, for the first time, I think they can work it out, but I just think it's, for them to work out.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Elaine?
Yeah, this is just like we mentioned in the previous solicitations. Typically, the applicants are attaching their policy or their city code of their clearance. I mean, that has been the typical city. They're not doing it themselves. They just attach the code that the property owners have to maintain. So that's all we've asked before. They don't have to, as a city or county, say, we're clearing it. It's, what is your policy? Whether it's doing it yourself or the property owner.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. Kyle?
Just quick, I think on a lot of these projects, they're going to be along collector roadways, and a lot of them, there aren't adjacent residents, and they're not going to be, the cities don't require clearing on collector roadways for these projects, as that's just my experience or expectation, that it's not a lot of these projects aren't going to be where there's a homeowner directly adjacent to it that is going to clear it. But I'd be curious to know that, but my own guess is that that's not going to address a lot of these projects.
Okay. No, a lot of good comments on this. I see Russ just added a comment, that's Egan's situation. So what you just described. So good content to talk about. I do want to give Lissa an opportunity to talk about just some thoughts and proposals that the counties put together regarding the funding percentages for each category. So Lissa, if you're still available and you want to pull that up, let's do that quick. And if folks can hang on for a few extra minutes, I know there's a lot to go through. It's a lot of detail. If you're able to stick around, that's great. If not, we understand, but just want to get this out there so the group can see it. Lissa, if you're still on.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth probably going through every single one and every single score, but what the counties talked through was lowering, because of all the discussion about community considerations, some folks feeling like it's of course an improvement, but a lot of folks feeling like it still doesn't really meet the mark or help with how agencies actually deliver projects, with also then coupled with a lot of statements being made that folks think that all the projects are going to score mediums across the board. And so more than likely, this isn't going to be a scoring differentiator on any application. And then now with the potential proposal that I thought had some good traction at the policymaker work group, was having the kind of guaranteed funding for any project that did hit a high. So based on all of that, the counties put together a proposal to drop the community considerations to 10% across the board on every single category. Some folks wanted, nothing to be on, say bridges or on safety. Other folks, I personally think it needs to be consistent. It's hard to justify why one should have a higher or lower score. And then where we put points was into other categories, basically moved the other 10% of points into other categories that we felt needed to be prioritized. And so we put a Word document together that shows all the community considerations down to 10%, and then highlighting where the additional 10% was put. Maybe we can email that out. I don't know if you want me to share and just kind of scroll through that. It's a lot to consume, but kind of the general thought process is we don't want to obviously propose to get rid of this, but with, like I said, the concerns of this not moving the mark anyway, with statements about people thinking these are going to score, it's not going to be a score differentiator, then why put 20%? Let's put the points towards the other technical measures that really will potentially make an impact or move the mark. And then this coupled with TAB having the option to provide funding for projects that do score high, that then takes care of the other side of this on being able to reward people who are doing this well, which I think is what we want. And I think then if agencies are seeing this happen, that they are being rewarded for doing this well, then that potentially then moves the mark. So anyway, it might be best just to email this out to TAC afterwards so people can see it. But that was what the counties discussed.
All right, thank you, Lissa. Amy?
Yeah, I did want to respond to Lissa's comment. I do think the two issues are intertwined. So the idea of the level of scoring for the measures and the priority funding are somewhat intermixed. And that's one reason we were emphasizing consistent scoring across all categories, all projects having to address and think about these measures. And then the proposal was to go down to one project for the funding priority. But I would somewhat agree that if we lower the scoring on community considerations, we should consider bringing up the number of priority projects because they kind of play off each other.
Okay. So Alyssa, I think Steve does have a copy of that the project team has a copy of the comments from the counties. Steve, feel free to share those with the group. I know we're short on time for getting a lot of comments back and more feedback. So especially our funding and programming partners, they have a lot to do in a short amount of time. With that being said, Steve, I want to turn it back to you. You've got some more slides to try and cruise through. Maybe you can hit the high points and discuss where you think we need to focus today.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything quickly that we can go through. There wasn't maybe on the car sharing and bike sharing. That was one thing that TAB had asked us to look into, and I don't think we came to a consensus, perhaps at the technical steering committee on kind of a path forward. So be thinking a little bit about that. And I think the comments on car sharing and bike sharing were related to we got rid of unique projects, which was one of the sources for car sharing, particularly that we funded in the past. Is the current structure adequate for funding these types of projects? Dollar values are lower than they were before. So we laid out with the technical steering committee, where would car sharing and bike sharing be eligible? And I think the options are run it through as is, or we could set aside some amount of money this cycle and then talk about it more over the next 2 years if we need to create a unique projects category come back or some other category for some of these shared mobility and other related kind of project types. So it's kind of a long conversation, but I just encourage people to look through these two slides on car sharing and bike sharing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Steve.
As far as next steps, we are, as Amy mentioned, we are going to the Transportation Committee of the Met Council on Monday. We'll bring this feedback we received today to the policy work group, which meets before TAB executive in December. And so that will be the place we'll bring it back and get some more input from policymakers on a couple of these issues.
Okay. All right, looking at the timeline there, if you zoom to that real quick, maybe just a quick overview of that again.
A few slides ahead. Back one. So the package of materials will be sent out to F&P, roughly a week before that December 18th meeting, and that will be, 9 or 10 action items. Well, both HSIP, active transportation, and regional solicitation type items. And if it all goes through on that meeting, then we'd go out for public comment after the January tab, and then it flows back through the committees for a final approval, starting at the February funding and programming. The goal is to get done by the end of 2026 with project selection before some of the, especially the tab members turn over with elections and terms ending. So that's the goal we're shooting for, and maybe an aggressive goal. But that's the way we've set it out today. If we need more time to talk about a particular issue before approval, then we do. But
okay. Yep. I see there's a few hands up. Let me just transfer over here quick, see who was first. Paul, go ahead.
Yep, Mr. Chair. I mean, just in lieu of what we've just talked about, and there's a lot of loose ends here. It seems to me that maybe we should consider another technical steering committee meeting prior to the December 18th funding and programming committee. I mean, we've got a lot to talk about. I mean, with the new proposal with the county, community considerations, the car sharing issue, the winter maintenance stuff. I think there's a lot of things that we should try to flesh out before we start taking actions on some of these items. So I'm just throwing out there for consideration. Thank you.
Yep. So Chair Kosucher, looking at this timelines, what are our thoughts here quick as far as how many items did you say we have, Steve? 9 items to go before the funding and programming?
Sounds about right. Yeah. 9 or 10. Yeah. With HSIP in there.
To be able to digest all that information, just being frank, Jim, do you think that's something that you need to split up, part in January, part in February, to release those on a different timeline, allow a little more time for review? And then, as Paul mentioned, we could have time for another technical steering committee meeting as necessary on some of these items. Maybe he's not on here anymore. He might be gone. I'll circle back with him.
Okay.
And talk to him, and I'll follow up with you as well, Paul. If there's others that have comments or feelings on that, feel free to share those with me or the project team here. But any additional questions or comments? I know we're beyond time here. I appreciate you guys sticking with it here. Important topics, but all right, we got a comment there. Yeah.
I don't have a specific question, but I just have a short announcement. After about 39 and some months with the state of Minnesota, 38 with MPCA, and about 1.5 years with Department of Transportation, I would like to announce that I will be retiring early next year, January of next year. My last day is January 12th. So it's been a great honor and appreciation to be working with most of you throughout the years, staff and members of that committee and other technical advisory committees and technical groups that we've been working on a lot of issues, including working from non-attainment area to attainment now, and a lot of programs that we've been able to achieve to improve environment within the state of Minnesota. So it's really a great honor to be spending most of those years with all of you. And I would spend time with families and do a lot of traveling. And my daughter is getting married in August of next year, so that would give me some time to work on that. So thanks a lot for all the help that you guys, the assistance you provided, MPC, and going through most of the equality issues that we had throughout the years. And I will let the staff know any events that is planning toward the retirement. So I will let everybody know about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Innocent. I think on behalf of the TAC here and members that aren't here anymore, congratulations. We appreciate you being part of this team and all the contributions you've given here. So thank you so much for that. Are you sure you don't want to hang in there a little longer with your daughter getting married? You might need some additional revenue there just to
Yeah, I know.
that.
I think it's been enough. 39 and a half years. I think that is long enough. I didn't expect that.
No, yeah. Well, congratulations on both accounts there.
All right,
well done.
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments to come before the committee? Otherwise, we'll consider this meeting adjourned. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.